Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for north central Minnesota. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Ray Gildow, and welcome to Lakeland Currents. Tonight our topic is going to be fisheries, and we're talking from a group of guys from the Leech Lake area that are all experts in this, and they're going to tell us why we aren't catching as many as we should, or why we're catching more than we should. Anyway, it's a very, very interesting topic going into the cold season, and it's very, very interesting. Wade, let's start with you.
Thanks, Ray, for having us on today. My name is Wade Masher. I'm the Walker Area Fisheries Supervisor. I've been an area fisheries supervisor with the state since 2022. I started off in Park Rapids, and just recently, starting this year in June, I moved over and am now the Walker Area Fisheries Supervisor. And with that today, I brought my two local area experts with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Absolutely, Jody.
I am Jody Dirks. I am the Assistant Fisheries Supervisor in Walker and have been there since 2018.
And you come from Iowa.
Yes.
And you come from Wisconsin.
I do.
We won't hold that against you. Carl.
I'm Carl Peterson. I'm the large lake specialist for Leech Lake for the state of Minnesota.
What does it mean, large lake?
Well, the large lake program, there's 10 large lakes that we have in Minnesota. And what they did years and years ago, they realized that we've got these large lakes that what we want to do is try to focus the large lake samplings so we get it more unified and do similar things so we can kind of compare the results and what we're doing. So, and what's worked on your lake, what's worked on this lake. So we realized a lot of the traffic, a lot of the fishing pressure occurs on those 10 major large lakes. So we want to really put a focus on those. So each large lake has a large lake specialist assigned to it. So I'm the one that's working on specifically Leech Lake.
And you've been there for how long?
I've been in the Walker office since 2012 and the large lake specialist since
2016?
Yep.
And you kind of wrapped up your work in the water once it starts getting cold? You're not out there as much anymore?
Yeah. We have specific sampling we do every year. We sample Leech Lake every year. So we do sampling in June, specific things. Certain things we do in July, like we'll do some near shore seining in July. And then in August, we do some trawling. It's basically drag a big net along the bottom, looking for more of the young year fish, the fish were born that year. September, we do some sampling for the bigger fish. So we're targeting specifically adults, perch, walleyes, Cisco's and the northerns. And then we also do some electrofishing in the fall. And then we usually wrap that up about mid-October or so.
Wade, what are you finding as you get new to the area? What's some of the things that are interesting you?
So for this area, it's always interesting going from area to area. Lakes are always different. And so coming from Park Rapids, we didn't have the large lake aspect. So moving over to Walker, having Leech as part of that is really interesting to me. But then not only Leech as a large lake, you also have like the Woman Chain, which is a group of lakes that are just phenomenal. But you also have 10 Mile Lake, which is another extremely deep lake going down to 200 feet that is basically its own system in itself. It's just all fascinating.
It really is a wide array of different lakes, isn't it?
Yes.
I've always told people every lake is like a person.
Yep.
They're all unique and they're all different. Habitat's different, the forage base is different. I've been reading that there aren't many leeches left on Leech Lake, the big ribbon leeches we used to see floating around. Is that true? Anybody can address that?
Yeah, we don't have actual numbers on it because we didn't, we've definitely noticed, at least anecdotally, that we don't see as many as we used to see when we're out sampling. We had one of the Star Tribune reporters out with us this summer looking for some, and we were able to find a few as we were out there. But yeah, I don't see as many. And as far as what is occurring and what's causing that, we really don't have any idea. Talked to some specialists that work on specific leeches, and they didn't have any real indicators of what would be causing that either. So,
And I think one thing just to throw into there, Carl's kind of playing it down. Him and Jody were out seining with the Star Tribune reporter, and they weren't finding anything in the nets. And Carl just happened to look down, and there was a leech in the water. Reached down, picked it up, got one in his hand.
I'll be darned. Well, yeah, I can remember 30 years ago, you'd see them everywhere, floating. They're swimming usually not very far, not very deep in the water. What's the health of Leech Lake? Is it pretty healthy right now?
Overall, it's pretty healthy. Yep.
And I know that there's been talk, and I think maybe it's beyond talk, that you're maybe going to stock some fry in it next spring?
Yep, that is potential that we will be doing that.
And what's causing that to happen?
So that is just part of our annual sampling that we do, that Carl does on Leech Lake. As he samples, we're looking to see, we have different management objectives that we need to meet. We're meeting certain objectives, but then if there's a certain objective that isn't being met, we have things in place that could potentially trigger stocking. And so that's what has occurred.
So, and I understand obviously that if you were to stock larger bait fish in the lake, shouldn't call them bait fish, but if you were to stock 11, 12-inch walleyes, that's a very expensive proposition, isn't it?
That is, dollar-wise and manpower-wise, it would be out of our realm.
How does the manpower affect that?
Just because, not only manpower, but having the area to do it. Because not only are we doing leech, but it's a statewide effort to stock.
Yep.
And getting potentially 7.5 million fish. That's a lot of fish, and that's a lot of water that would need to be covered.
So how do you determine where you're going to put those fry when you go out on the lake in the spring?
I think Carl would have a better idea on that.
What we've done in the past is we've looked at the size, like you're talking about the different lakes that are out there. Leech is basically, if you haven't been on Leech, if you don't know the lake well, I know you know it very well, but it's a bunch of different lakes. It's, there's deep basins, there's, over 135 feet deep in Walker Bay, but then we also have, just north of there, Steamboat Bay, which is completely, I think 9 feet is the deepest that entire bay is. So we look at those different bays, how big they are, so we break out. We look at how many fry we think the lake needs to supplement some of the natural reproduction, and we break that up based on percentages, like how big is this bay, so we take a certain percentage of those fry that we're going to put into the lake and separate those out throughout the bays.
And do you have any idea how many survive? I'm sure that's...
Yep.
You do?
Yeah, we generally have a general idea. So what we'll do is, what we've done in the past is when we've done fry stocking is we'll mark the fish that we put into the lake. And so what we can do is that sampling that I talked about that we do every year, we'll go back in, we'll collect those fish, we'll get a number on how many we pulled, how many young a year were produced each year, and then we can actually go back and look and see if those were stocked fish or if they were naturally produced fish. And we've got estimates that we can do based on how many adult females we have in the lake. We have an estimate on how many eggs they generally produce based on the sizes. It's a bunch of modeling that we've done different as part of the Large Lake program that has developed these models and things like that.
And you do something to the fry so you can tell that they're stocked.
Yep. So what we do is we take those, as soon as they hatch, we'll put them in just basically just a jug, and it's a dye in essence what it does, and it dyes the hard parts. So actually some of the bones in there. So we'll go out and collect fish in the fall and throughout the summer, and we can pull out those bones. So we have to sacrifice a few of them. We can pull out those bones, look at it under a microscope, and it shines like a phosphorescent light. So you shine a certain kind of light on it, and then you can see if that ring shows up that that was a stocked fish or it was not stocked fish.
I'll be darned.
So we looked at the numbers in the past. It varies based on the summer, how good of a summer it was for production, because different year classes show up differently. So
I can't remember where I read this. I read somewhere where the fingerlings that they're raising in some of the ponds have grown larger than normal because of maybe the warmer weather. I'm not sure. Have you heard that?
Yeah, we've had some interesting thing with fingerling production in the state. We're having a lot of trouble with the warmer summers, because actually the warmer winters, because what we need for good pond production and what we do for our fingerling production is we put fry into the ponds, and then they grow throughout the summer. In the fall, we go out and collect them, and then we stock them into whatever lakes they need it. What we need is a clean pond with no fish in it, because there's no competition then. We can we're only growing fry. But if it doesn't winter kill, then there's carryover from the year previous. So actually those walleyes from the year previous will predate on the fish you're putting in there for that year. So we haven't had very good winter kills the past couple of years, so our ponds aren't producing as well as they used to. And the warm summers has also created some issues with, if they get too hot in the ponds and they don't survive. But the growing season, if we have a long drawn out sort of warm summer, that's best for growth. It's just like growing degree days with your corn or your soybeans or whatever. Same thing with walleyes. So, and we track growing degree days in Leech Lake for the walleyes, and last year was a phenomenal growth year for the fry that we had in Leech.
Really?
Yeah, they were one of the biggest going into the winter. They were some of the biggest ones we've seen in the history of tracking them.
Wow,
yeah,
that's interesting.
Which is great for the bigger they are over the winter, the better they are to survive.
And I know you have a report you put out every fall from the work that you do. How do people access that?
So those reports, basically what happens is all the data gets analyzed in the fall, and then everything will get finalized, and then that following spring, that will come out. That information will be available online on our website.
Okay. So, and the website is?
Just Minnesota DNR, and
Okay.
then you can find.
And then you go
actually,
to
you
Leech
can go
Lake or-
into Lake Finder is the best website to go to.
Okay.
Minnesota Lake Finder.
Okay.
You can type in Leech Lake, and you can go look up Leech Lake, and you can look up the data from that previous year.
I marvel at the work you do because Leech Lake, as you know, is I think 640 some miles around the edge. That's a huge body of water. And to be able to go in there and really start identifying some of the things that are going on, it's amazing. And now climate change is affecting all of us in some way or another. And I'm sure it's affecting the lake's growth of the fish that you've talked about because we got 2 or 3 weeks warmer weather than we had not that long ago.
Well, that and just ice on and ice off dates are changing
And
drastically.
last fall was not a hard fish kill from people because they couldn't get on the lake. It was so warm. It was really dangerous. It looks like this year people are getting on the lake pretty early.
Getting on early, but ice is still thin.
Yes, it's dangerous. I'm a big perch fisherman. I just love fishing perch. I've been fishing perch for years and years and years. And I've been reading that the perch numbers across the country are going down. But now I've read some research that maybe they're not going down so much as they are getting smaller and reaching maturity at 3 or 4 inches. Are you finding that, Carl?
Yeah, we've seen that on a number of area lakes, including Leech Lake. Like it's rare for us to see an immature male perch. So they're maturing at very, very small sizes.
Wow.
So what happens is when they mature so small, they don't get big enough. And a lot of our gears, they'll just swim right through because we're targeting adult fish. And if they're getting adult at this size, the mesh on our gill nets is a certain size to catch the adults that we've seen in the past.
So the numbers might still be good. They're just little.
Yep.
And is there anything that can be done to get them bigger?
Right. Yeah, that's what we're kind of looking at on leeches. What we try to do, especially with the large lakes and all the lakes, is try to get a good balance. So what we were kind of concerned with on leech is that we were protecting too many large fish and too many walleyes. So we had a slot limit on the lake because back in the mid 2000s, production kind of tanked. We had a lot of cormorants on the lake. They're eating a lot of fish. So we did a number of things. We started stocking fish on the lake. We implemented a slot limit to try to protect spawners. And then we also started controlling some of the cormorants that were eating a lot of fish. So of those 3 things, the lake started to come back. And then we started looking at the numbers, those annual surveys that we do, kind of comparing them to previous years, and realized that, I think we have a lot of spawners, and we almost have too many spawners out there. They're throwing too many small fish out there, and there's density-dependent things. So, all those small fish are competing with each other for the resources out there, and they're kind of chewing the prey base down. So that predator balance was kind of getting out of whack a little bit. So we pulled off the slot limit on the walleyes to give that prey a chance to kind of come back and recover a bit.
Are you seeing a little bit of recovery?
We are started this last year. Actually, 2 years ago, we saw one of the 4th highest perch hatch rates we've ever seen. It was crazy numbers. Wow. Yeah, it was just like tons of them. And if you got an underwater camera, like when you're perch fishing, there's a lot of little ones out there, which is just tremendous for them to eat. It can be frustrating if you're trying to fish because there'd be a lot of sorting that has to happen. But we did a creel survey last winter. It was a rough year to have a creel survey on the winter because it was just, you couldn't access, the anglers weren't out there. I had a great winter because I could walk out, but the people that really want to use their houses, they just couldn't get them on the lake. So the winter pressure was really down in certain parts of the lake, but they're starting to plow some roads on Leech Lake that we haven't seen in the past. So that pressure has increased. So we're seeing a lot more wheelhouse traffic, a lot less day trip angler traffic.
Carl, maybe you could talk a little bit about Woman Lake and some of the research that you've been doing there, because that's really fascinating, I think.
Yeah, Jody might be a better option.
Yeah.
Woman Lake, we have an egg take operation on the Boy River just upstream of Woman Lake. And what we were finding is, traditionally, historically, we had always put back 10% of the eggs that we had taken. 10% of that fry would be a put back return to make up for what we had taken from natural reproduction. A study from 2007 to 2015 actually looked at the variable hatch rates and the survivability of not only the fry to fingerling stage, but from fingerling stage up to adult stage or a harvestable size fish. And what we found is that actually when it comes time to stocking, less can be more. So rates varied anywhere from like 1,000 to up to about 6,000 fry per littoral acre. And a littoral acre is an acre of water that is 15 feet or less. That's where the majority of our production is happening in a lake. And so what we ended up finding was that 500 to 650 was kind of ideal for women. We went down to 500 fry per littoral acre. And since we've done that, starting in 2016, we have had consistently stronger year classes in our gill nets. So talking age 1, 2, 3, 4 walleyes, they've been consistently stronger. We might not see as many young of the year walleyes during our electrofishing survey, but as Carl mentioned earlier, they're bigger. And what we know from years of study is that the bigger the fingerling can be going into its first winter, the higher its survival. So fewer fingerlings, but bigger, will eventually equate to more fish reaching a creel.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm assuming it was you guys that did the work on the crappies last winter to see what ages were. Was that your group?
The barotrauma stuff? Or?
I'm not
I would
sure.
assume it would be the beer trauma stuff.
Where they were aging them to see how old the crappies were. I have a friend that worked with fisheries somewhere, and they had underwater drones, and they were tracking these fish. And he's a doctor at MD. He's retired semi. But he said they were finding that some of these 10-inch crappies were 16 and 17 years old.
Oh yeah.
Does that sound
Very
like right?
long-lived. Yep.
Wow. So I think people think when you see a 10-inch crappie, that's just a little young one. It's not necessarily, is it?
Not at all.
And that's what's interesting about those fish, especially because certain fish like northerns, they'll go fast. We'll harvest our fingerling northerns or like a muskie, 12 inches. It can go 12 inches in the first summer. Where a walleye, 6 inches is a good number. Ours on Leech Lake this summer, they were 7, which is tremendous.
Wow.
But those panfish, especially if they're in these stunted populations, it might take 10 years for like a bluegill or a crappie to become a catchable fish that you want to bring home. So.
Wow. I think that's, it was I think an article in the Outdoor News about that. I think it shocked everybody that saw that and said, what? A 10-inch crappie is 17 years old?
Well, and then another thing that you can think of too is, especially in these northern waters compared to the southern waters, we just don't have the temperature and the productivity as well.
Right.
Those are two large factors that help in that growth.
Yeah.
And so, not having those, they grow a lot slower, and you'll get some age on them.
I know you guys work with lake associations very well. Have a good reputation of doing that. Do you work with the University of Minnesota, their research areas quite a bit too?
Yep, quite a bit. We actually have somebody coming up there's a group coming up this winter. We're going to do some core sampling on the lake. It's a study through the University of Minnesota where they're going to actually drill down and try to get 200 years worth of core samples off the lake. So what they're looking at is some walleye habitat. So what was the walleye habitat like back over, up to 100, 200 years ago, and how does it compare to where it's at now? So kind of look at some of those things. But yeah, we do quite a bit of research. Some things we're looking at with the Lake Association and the Cass County Soil and Water Conservation District is not just looking at those adult fish as well. We're also looking at, some of that food chain, some of the bottom of that food chain. So how is that affecting things, especially now that we've got zebra mussels in Leech Lake as well? So are there, are we taking out that bottom of the food chain? Is it switching from out in the middle of the water column more into the shallows and the shoreline? And how is that being affected? But yeah, we definitely work with Bemidji State University quite a bit. They've got a real good fisheries program up there, so we work with them because it's close proximity as well. So.
I read where we're starting to see mercury levels increasing in some of the perch and the walleyes. Mm-hmm. Do we know what's causing that?
Well, what they think is that it's methylated mercury, and what happens is there's different bioaccumulation, there's different chemical things that happen in the water, and when they're up feeding more in the shallows as opposed to out in the middle of the water column, that methyl, the natural mercury that's going in the systems is getting turned into methyl mercury that's getting uptaken by the fish, by they're eating those small things and through that food chain, that it's coming up through the food chain. And some of the smaller lakes, they're noticing that that's what's happening. That's what some of that University of Minnesota research has shown that, and our DNR folks as well.
They haven't told us as adults to not eat fish yet, but I know they're being very careful with kids, with infants, with mercury levels. When you guys go out in the fall and do your work, do you ever get volunteers to help you? Or
all the time.
Oh, you do?
All the time.
And
Jody takes a lot of people out with us.
Where do they come from? Where do your volunteers come from?
All over. We've had just anybody that's called the office that people have been interested. A lot of them are Lake Association members, input group members, that kind of thing. It's popular with Leech. People like to come out and see the gill nets and in the fall and trawling in the summer, that kind of thing. We take them out on just our regular area lake surveys as well. All you have to do is get a hold of us, and we can get you the paperwork signed and get you out on the boat with us.
I know the zebra mussels have changed fishing pretty drastically in the lakes where they're at. You used to be able to go out in 8-9 feet of water and catch a walleye under the boat. Now they see you coming and poof, they're gone. Do you guys have any, I know the DNR hasn't taken a strong position on forward-facing sonar. Do you guys have any concerns about that?
Well, we definitely, concerns about the, the fishing on Leech is definitely, we think it's changing just because the water clarity and water, the fish are starting to get, like you said, a lot more spooky. So, pulling up on a big pot of fish and pulling a few off of there is a little bit more difficult because they're getting just so much spookier. And that's what the folks that are, like the days where I still do it, drag a Lindy rig through and the fish are scattering. It's not working as well anymore. So a lot of the guys that are doing better, they're actually casting to the fish. A lot more slip bobbers. You hardly saw slip bobbers.
Never.
15.
Mille Lacs, yes, but not at Leech.
Or in Wisconsin. I went to school in Wisconsin. We'd use slip bobbers over there because you could use 2 lines. So you throw a slip bobber and then jig with the other one. But now they're starting to fish away from the boat a lot more as opposed to fishing behind the boat like I'm used to doing. So yes, there's definitely some concerns. And fish, we're looking at it statewide, especially the DNR is looking at it. Like we kept track of the last 2 creels last winter and this summer on Leech Lake, how many boats and how many anglers were actually using forward-facing sonar. And we got some folks that are looking at it statewide. So are the folks that are using forward-facing sonar having better catch rates than the ones that are not using forward-facing sonar, and trying to look at some of those things. And how do we regulate that? Boy, that's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah,
do you have the data? I suppose you don't have data yet. Really.
Yeah, we've got it, but we haven't we haven't analyzed it all.
Okay.
Like Wade said, we just now finished. The creel just finished a month ago, so we're still
Okay.
in the process of crunching those numbers. But the few pieces of research that have looked at it, the catch rates haven't been drastically different. The guides that are using the forward-facing sonar seem to be catching a lot more fish, but a lot of times the guides catch more fish anyway because they really know the water bottom, they know what they're doing, as opposed to somebody that's maybe coming from out of town that doesn't know the lake. They're trying to learn the lake, so it takes them a couple of days to learn where on the lake the best places to fish are. Especially a lake as big as Leech, it's 100,000 acres. So there's a lot of water to look for.
Yeah,
So.
I know a lot of the lakes in your area, a lot of the lakes in the Brainerd area, have good crappie populations. And the one thing I would be concerned about as just as a guide is that that's a lot of pressure when you have a forward-facing sonar and you find these schools of fish in a small lake. People just need to think about releasing, and don't catch them deep because they're probably not going to make it anyway. So that to me would be a concern. And
that is one of the concerns that we've heard from people, as state employees. One of the biggest concerns is probably hard water. People get out with the forward-facing sonar and they go find those deep holes, and you can pretty easily target them.
Yeah.
So we have heard those concerns, and that's something we are definitely listening to as a state, and we're looking into it.
How about rusty crayfish? Are those populations stable?
Actually, they were fairly stable, but I don't know if the zebra mussel numbers are helping rusty crayfish. But I just looked at the rusty crayfish numbers here the other day, and on Leech Lake we had the highest catch rates. We keep track of the rusty crayfish in our nets because a lot of times they'll get entangled with those nets and we'll have to pick them out. So we actually keep track of the rusty crayfish numbers. And it had kind of settled out, but this last year they took another uptick. So we're waiting to see what happens with those rusty crayfish numbers for sure. Because
And are you seeing increases in our area lakes of aquatic invasive species, or is that mostly stable now, do you think?
Well, the
in
numbers
general?
of zebra mussels are increasing. There's just, we don't have that many lakes in our Walker area. We have roughly 200 lakes that we manage in our Walker Fisheries area, including Leech Lake. And there's maybe, I think around 10 that have zebra mussels in them right now. So really, the vast majority of our lakes do not have zebra mussels.
I didn't realize that. I thought more of them had those in there.
No, in our area, we're surrounded by it. Now with Leech Lake has it, the woman chains, 10 miles. So they're starting to see more and more now. But,
that's great.
Yeah, it's just a few.
I mean, that's great that there's not that many lakes that are infested.
Right.
But how things have changed in the last 20 years, isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know some states now are limiting how many crappies you can keep if you've got forward, or they can just reduce the numbers because they were taking too many, killing too many. Yeah, and don't catch them deep. When you catch these fish deep, because I know they used to go down to the south end of Leech and catch them down there in 60, 80 feet of water, and they say, well, we released them. You could drop cameras down there and see dead fish all over. It's really, really sad to see. We are the persons responsible for this resource. It's not you guys, it's us, the end users. So, well, tell me how people get in touch with you guys. I think you just do a great job. It's very complicated work. And Jody, coming from Wisconsin, I'm amazing you can keep up with it.
Yeah, right.
You have a website.
Yes.
Just for Walker. I mean, if somebody wants to get a hold of you in Walker, how do they do that?
So if you just get online, do it like a Google search, you can look up Walker Fisheries Office, Minnesota, and first thing will pop up is Walker Fisheries Office. Click on that link. It'll give you a little spiel about what our office is, what it covers. There's several different tabs. If you scroll down to the bottom, we have a tab that says Talk to Us. If you click on that, that has my name, my email, and my office phone number. And then from there, it just goes down the chain. It's got Jody's name, his email, phone number, Carl. It's got our other area specialists, Aaron Hawes and John Gustafson. And it's got all of our emails and every way to get a hold of us.
Well, you guys
Actually, the best way to get a hold of us, really, is to just stop on into the office.
There you go. On the south end of Leech.
Yeah.
Right off the highway.
Yep.
You guys do a great job. Thanks for taking time to jump on with me, and look forward to seeing you on the water.
Of course. Thanks, Ray.
You bet. You've been watching Lakeland Currents. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.